In the world of order management, tracking key performance indicators, or KPIs, is crucial, but many businesses are focusing on the wrong metrics. The truth is, while companies often measure what's easy, they fail to track what truly drives efficiency and customer satisfaction. I'm Scott Leahy, and this is Esker on Air. Today, we're exploring the critical key performance indicators in order management that can help achieve B2B customer service and supply chain excellence. Joining me are two experts in the field, Esker's own Nick Carpenter and Graham Smith, both business development managers in the customer service order management space. So, Nick, Graham, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Good to be back. And gotta say, I use the term expert loosely. I'll say everything that we talk about today, not my ideas, simply trying to relay some of the good points I hear from some really sharp people that both Graham and I have the opportunity to work with.
Why are order management KPIs critical for businesses today?
I would say they're critical for businesses today because I think B2B is really now starting to widely accept the impacts of customer experience. And we're seeing it in a few ways, right? In the book by Jim Tincher, Do B2B Better, he makes a really compelling argument that shows that those organizations that have a customer experience focus actually outperform their peers in the market than those that did not or were laggards. So not just market performance, I mean overall health of the organization, right? We're talking about things like profitability through lowering your SG&A overhead. We're talking about things like revenue growth, right? Creating repeat orders or gaining more wallet share from your customers. You know, wallet share being the amount of money they spend with you versus what they spend in the entire category as a whole. So revenue, profitability, market capitalization, I think there's a compelling argument to be made for all of it.
And so how should businesses determine which KPIs are most relevant to their operations?
You know, it's always a tricky question, right? Because every company is a little bit different in what KPIs might be important to them, as well as what are they looking to accomplish, right? One example being, it might not make sense to measure some of your cycle times or try to measure those if you don't have the right data for those, or if you have dirty data for those, if you have bad processes in place, right? So being able to align what those priorities are, what you're looking to achieve, the outcomes that you're looking for, and working your way back to understand, okay, what are the metrics that we need to accomplish that is kind of that starting point there, right? Now, what I see oftentimes, at least in the customer service world, is they identify that maybe there's a lack of visibility, maybe there is inefficiencies within a process, within that customer service group, which leads them to then be analyzing, what is the average amount of time that's being spent on order entry, on being able to respond to customers, or at least that first response, being able to analyze that first response to resolution time, things like that. And then in addition to that as well, it could look like, how do we better measure the order accuracy that's coming in? How do we better measure the customer experience? How do we better measure our employee experience? How do we better measure, CSAT, ESAT scores, things like that?
Yeah, and I think Graham hit the nail on the head, starting with the outcomes in mind and then working backwards, right? So I don't want to make it a commercial for Jim's book, but you should buy Jim's book. It's gold, right? He makes the argument that you should align your CX metrics and your customer service metrics with the organizational priorities. So if it's revenue growth, what can we do in customer service to help improve that, right? Is it measuring the repeat order performance? Is it measuring the average order value, right? So starting with the goal in mind and then kind of working backwards. I think the other thing we were talking about was it matters on your industry, right? Yep. Not every industry measures the same impacts, right? If you're a distribution organization focused on speed, right? If you're an engineered to order manufacturer, you're focused on the overall cycle time, the number of touches, right? How quickly we can go from demand to order placement. So I think and throw the third thing out there: ask your customers, right? A lot of people say we asked our customers, "What's your biggest pain point with our organization?" to your point, start with the end in mind. What do they say is that friction point? Well, then let's measure back to it so that we can eliminate that friction point, whether it's quality, response time, engagement. You can create those metrics based on what your customers are driving, not just some standard KPI across the board, universal for everybody.
So I've heard the word data used. We've talked about metrics. What are the key differences between data and metrics? And why is that important to distinguish between the two when managing order performance?
So, the way that I think about data and the way that I think of metrics is they are two different things, but they can be leveraged for the same outcomes, right? So oftentimes data is the data that you're getting out of some sort of process where that metric might expand that data, right? So if we look at the average cycle time, that could be a data point or that could be a metric depending on how you want to manage that. One data point might be how many orders are being processed by a specific route. Well, getting some metrics on that makes you want to get a little bit more granular. Okay, they've processed 26 orders today, but what's the average time for entry? Okay, 26 orders have been in the queue of this customer service rep. Well, how much time did they spend during the day? What was their average time from reception to resolution? Average time from reception to first response. Now, some of that is data points, right? But also some of that can be leveraged as metrics to better coach and staff the team.
I think data leads to metrics, right? That's what Christine Pfefferly from Redstone Consulting, really top-notch consultant in the customer service area. One of the things that she talks about, right, is that the KPIs are meant to drive behavioral changes, right? And the data is just the raw data. For example, we've got data on the number of inquiries and orders that come into our team, but the KPI is what's the average cost to serve, right? Divided by the number of employees. So it just kind of takes it that step further and helps to drive it, an actionable insight as opposed to just, a bunch of data points, which are just the raw data.
We've been a little vague so far in talking about KPIs. Let's be a little more specific now. Could the two of you walk us through maybe some of the most common order management KPIs and why they might be so important?
Yeah, that's a good question. It also does depend on industry, right? So I'll give you a couple examples. One, we see one organization manufacturer of life sciences, medical device equipment, right? And what they measure, especially one of their big metrics, is the overall cycle time, which impacts DSO for their orders. They measure order cycle time, which has a direct impact on when they can bill a customer. And when they can bill that customer, obviously, then starts the clock for when they can get paid and keep that working capital churning through the organization. So that's one that they measure. I was talking to an organization yesterday that sells into retail. And, their big one is order fill rates, right? So, because they're going to get fined from some of the big retailers if they're not filling orders in full based on what the customer actually ordered. In their scenario, 10% of the value of the unfilled order was a direct fine to the organization. So those are just kind of two examples, Graham. What are you seeing in your world?
Similar. So I work with a lot of building materials as well as a lot of manufacturing companies. And oftentimes what I'm seeing is cost to serve, on time in full.
Perfect order definitely comes to mind.
And then also DSO. Because in order to get full visibility into the customer service world, into ordering, you need to follow the entire journey of the order, right? So looking at the cost to serve helps you analyze, okay, how much time is it taking to get this information into the system, which includes the initial pricing request, the creation of a quote, sending that to a customer, potentially negotiating, the actual order, passing that along the value stream to then actually fulfill that order. Now, are we fulfilling that order on time? Is that order also being fulfilled in full? And then on the back end, if we aren't getting the right pricing, if we aren't accurately entering the order, if we aren't accurately fulfilling that order, that can lead to issues on the back end with DSO and potentially write-offs, right? And there's oftentimes a lot of very preventable deductions that are along sales, customer service, planning or manufacturing, as well as, the shipping dock, right?
It's a great point. The quality metrics, right? I think, a lot of times we focus on the efficiency metrics. How long does it take to, for an order from receipt to fulfillment? How long does it take a CSR to enter an order? How many touches per order? Those are all efficiency metrics. Graham, you're getting at some of the quality metrics, and I agree. That's where we've seen some really transformational business cases when organizations track, for example, the amount of claims tied to order entry errors. Now, that's just not just fat fingering something, but maybe they selected the wrong contract to create the order in reference to. Maybe there's you're selling to PepsiCo and you got 20,000 master data records for them. How do you select the right one? Mm-hmm. So I think that is where we see quality of order entry measured by the amount of potential write-offs that stem from issues during order entry. That's a really compelling metric.
I agree. And I touched on DSO, which I think, for a long time, I didn't attribute DSO to a metric, to being a metric or a KPI that I thought mattered as much to the customer service world, or matters as much if we're talking, say, order entry automation, right? But the more conversations that I've been having with people, with companies, the more insight I've been getting, and that can be a major impact. You mentioned, the impact to EBITDA, the impact to bottom line, the impact to your profit margin. If those orders aren't accurate and timely, that could lead to challenges on the back end. I was talking to a company just a couple weeks ago, and they were looking at a few customer service transformation projects, and they projected that they could get about a quarter day in DSO reduction by leveraging the tools that we sell. And that equated to about $12 million in open cash flow a year. Wow. Which is, huge.
Let's expand a little bit. And can the two of you discuss how a distribution company might prioritize different KPIs compared to, say, a manufacturing firm?
So I think there's going to be similarities between distribution and manufacturing. But if you're a company that has stock on hand, you're not one of these highly configurable, customized products that takes 60, 90 days, if not more, to manufacture. Oftentimes what you're measuring is how long does it take me to get that order out of the door? And then what is my order accuracy rate? Now, in a distribution model, most distributors are kind of like Amazon, right? They say, hey, we have this. We can send your order today if you get it into us by 4 p.m., right? So that can be an important metric. And then I also mentioned that order accuracy rate. If you want to have repeat customers, oftentimes you need to make sure that you're getting them what they ask for when they ask for it. So being able to make sure that that is accurately entered should, in a perfect world, ensure that that is accurately fulfilled. Also, if you look at the utilization of the entire team, right, the more time that you can give them, the more activities they can perform. So maybe you can be a little bit more proactive to say, hey, I understand that you ordered this. We have a similar product, and we wanted to see if it's okay if we sent that instead, so that we can make sure that we meet your expectations.
I think from what we have heard time and time again from distributors is they're competing through ease of doing business, right? Of enabling frictionless transactions, of not necessarily mandating how a customer needs to order them. And so I think we see, a lot of those efficiency metrics as a big measure of that, right? So we need to be able to take orders any way besides the smoke signal that they come in, and we need to be able to do them, within an hour and with as little touch and as quickly as possible, right? So I think that's one we hear on the distribution side. One is in the industrial side, right? The challenges that we're hearing from a lot of folks is around, order status because of that long lead time, because of how long that order is open. They're wanting to measure, how many customers are asking us, what's the status of my order? Is it 80% of our customers that ask us the status? If so, we might have a challenge in how we're communicating that to our customers during that life cycle of the order. So just two simple examples, I think, just to build off of what you were saying, Graham.
Yeah, and I want to add to errors as well, because I think that's a very important metric or KPI. And usually when it comes to errors, there's two different metrics that can be followed. It's the cost of error as well as the cost of return, right? And a lot of companies don't really analyze the reverse logistics that it might take to actually get that product back in the door, if they need to bring that product back in the door.
Okay, so we've discussed the data, the metrics, the KPIs, all that fun stuff. So what are some of the common challenges that businesses face just trying to track and improve the order management KPIs?
I love this. Another shout out to Christine. She showed me a graph where it shows the basic life cycle of an order, and it really touches multiple departments across customer service and supply chain. So the reality is some of the KPIs might not even be in your department, right? That need to be tracked. I think the other thing is that what's easy for one department could create backlogs for another. So we see that for things like order comes in, the master data needs to be set up. And all of a sudden you got to go swivel chair out, create a form for the master data team so they can process an order. It's just a really cumbersome process. It makes it easy for master data, but then it impacts your customer service metrics. So again, what's good for one might impact another. I think those are two common ones we run across.
I think the biggest thing that I see, I hear, or see challenges with, do you have the data or can you expose the data? Oftentimes the example that I hear is, well, I have some of the data, but I don't have any timestamps, right? So I don't know how long it takes in between, right? That's very impactful. If you don't know how much time it takes in between, you can't measure these metrics or KPIs to understand how your customers feel or how are you trending to the expectations that you've set with your customers. And then secondarily, those timestamps, that data is crucial for making decisions, whether that's for staffing purposes, whether that's for coaching purposes. Oftentimes what I hear in the customer service world is I have great visibility to everything that happens on the phone. But when it comes to everything else, all I know is what they tell me. I don't know if that's true. I believe them, but what's missing? And then again, I can't necessarily coach them if I don't understand the areas that maybe they're challenged, which if I have that data, if I can expose that data, I can leverage that data to say, hey, we need to have this conversation, and here's why.
And then next, perpetually a topic of conversation on this podcast, how can AI and automation improve the accuracy and efficiency of the KPIs we're interested in tracking?
Love it. I mean, I think what we hear is people are trying to balance quality efficiency metrics, cost to serve, with quality metrics, really exceptional customer experiences. How do you get there, right? I think there's the technology that takes out all of the busy work that you don't really need to be doing in 2024, so you can focus on those two aspects together. That's the big one that I'm hearing.
I'm a big fan of aggregating data. And if you have the data, that's great, but if it's sitting in 6 different locations, that requires 3 different teams to be able to pull that data together. Or if you have your manager, your team lead, spending 8 hours a week pulling that data together, that's very inefficient, right? And sometimes, hey, we can get the data, we can expose the data, but we just don't have the time to put it together. So being able to provide a single workbench to be able to get full visibility into, a day in the life of the customer service rep, to get insight for, again, acting on new initiatives, understanding the customer experience, is very powerful.
So you've both brought up conversations that you've had in the past. Can you think of a real world example where improving a specific KPI led to some very real benefits?
I've got one on the quality side, and it was around the quality claims, right? And so this organization was looking to use AI to better select the contracts that they're creating orders in reference to. And when they do that correctly, it defaults the right shipping terms, It draws down the quantity that this customer was contracted for, so there's kind of a price element to it. And if you select the wrong one, because you might have 20 open for this customer, it gets in the way of those things. And for them, by doing that correctly, among a few other things, they were saving $2 million a year in order entry write-offs tied to order entry.
One example that comes to mind is NVIDIA, and we have a case study outlining this. Massive company. I'm sure everybody listening to this is very familiar with NVIDIA. They use SAP, and the challenge that they came to us with was there's way too many touch points when it comes to processing orders. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to reduce those touch points. Now, we don't want to necessarily have complete touchless processing because that could lead to issues. But what we want is we want the rep to be presented with the information, see any discrepancies, and then have one-touch order processing. And they were able to achieve that. And in that time, they were able to increase their revenue by about 3x without actually adding any headcount, which is incredible.
Okay, so I've heard this metric brought up a couple times, this KPI, CTS, cost to serve. How do KPIs like CTS influence strategic decisions within a particular organization?
So I remember a scenario a couple years ago where I was talking to a company, and they had listed out what is the average revenue per customer, what is the average profitability per customer, and then what is the average cost to serve, right? Now, in that example, what they found was very interesting, that their highest revenue customers actually had the lowest cost to serve. Their lowest revenue customers and their least profitable customers had the highest cost to serve. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we're staffing an entire department to serve all of these customers that really aren't helping our bottom line that much. Now, understanding that says, okay, how can we take action on that? In their example, let's explore e-commerce opportunities. Hey, for these customers that might order once or twice a year, let's allow you to order online. For some of those customers that were kind of in the middle, maybe it makes sense to look at the EDI investment, right? And then for the rest of them, hey, maybe it looks like it makes sense to look at order entry automation, something like that.
That's a great one, great example. Cost to serve, I think one guy I was working with just showed me, he's like, here's all my touch points divided by my departmental budget for the year, right? And that's how I got cost to serve, was for everything that we did divided by all that we do, or all that we need in terms of resources. And for him, what he was trying to do is show that tools that lowered the handling time or offset inquiries, like a distributor-facing portal, or like ChatGPT for email status, what's the status of my order inquiries, helped him drive that cost per touch point much lower. So he was saying to the organization, I need far less resources, so I'm going to take my cost to serve from $1.50 per interaction down to $1 per interaction.
Looking forward, how do you see the role of KPIs evolving in the context of supply chain disruptions and economic uncertainties?
So, one thing that I think about is, hey, how do we leverage AI for better forecasting to better understand demand trends over the next 2 years? Now, nobody really knows what's going to happen with some of these disruptions in these times of uncertainty, but also COVID was a perfect example that prepared a lot of companies. And what a lot of companies realized is, hey, we need more business intelligence, we need better analytics, we need to be able to expose a lot more data so that we understand immediately any changes in the business.
Final question for you both. What advice would the two of you give to companies just beginning their search here and just beginning to track their order management KPIs?
Talk to your customers, ask them what they care about, right, to help you understand what you should measure. Number two, get the baseline tools and technology in place that you can measure what you need to measure, right? Eliminate those black holes, those silos from what you can track so that ultimately you can improve what you need to improve. So I'd say those are the two big ones.
3 things come to mind for me is understand your current state, understand what you're looking to accomplish, and prioritize, right? Because not every outcome is achievable with your current state. There are a lot of steps in between those, and I think sometimes people put the cart before the horse. So make sure that you have a good understand what level of buy-in you're going to be able to get with any of these initiatives, and then again, truly map out and understand what are you looking to accomplish with this.
Well, thank you both for being on the podcast here. It's much appreciated. If you have any questions or are interested in the ebook that this podcast is based on, feel free to check the links in the show notes. And as always, if you're interested in learning more about Esker, you can find us at esker.com. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll catch you next time.